I've heard this in this country too, and it's sometimes baffling to say, nay, every woman has their rights. What are you talking about? We're good. We don't need to do this. And I would say to those people that we just need to look at the data and look at the facts. I mean, I think once we get to the stage where women are and girls are in education at 50%, in the workforce at 50%, are in cabinet at 50%, are in the parliament at 50%, then we can think about, okay, maybe we need to sort of, balance things out a little bit, but we're not there yet. We are not there yet. The father of this nation, Muhammad Ali Jinnah, once said very, very, very clearly that you cannot progress and no nation can rise unless your women are standing shoulder to shoulder. So I see my role as more to amplify those voices, to create those spaces where they don't exist and encourage others to do so. So I think it is a fair point to say, I cannot consider myself as that spokesperson. I'm not for women. Women have their own voices and they need to speak, but it's a question of making sure you create the spaces, you see where the gaps are.
Do you like music?
You're asking someone from Bangladesh if they like music. Of course, music is, I think, the lifeblood. I enjoy music a great deal. I listen to a lot of Pakistani music as well.
Really?
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite?
I have a quite varied list, but for example, I really anything from sort of ghazals to Sufi to folk, whether it's Mehdi Hassan Saab and Abda Parveen. There is, I think, you have Hadika Kiani, Kurat Elaine Baloch, Misha Shafi, Reshma.
You know more than I do about this.
And anything that's on Coke Studio, which
you like Coke Studio.
I can say that I think it's the best Coke Studio in the entire sub-region.
Do you watch Pakistani plays?
I do enjoy. It is very addictive. Once in a while, and when you start an episode, it seems
What's
like.
What's the recent one that you've seen?
I think it's called Kabhi Main Kabhi Tum, if I'm not mistaken. It was.
I think,
this is the one with Fahad Mustafa and Hania Amir.
Hania Amir. Assalamu alaikum. This is your host Nabila Malik with another episode of Gender Talk. Gender Talk is a UN Women Pakistan podcast. And today we have a very special guest with us. We have Jamshed Kazi, the new country representative of Pakistan UN Women Office. Welcome, Jamshed. And before we dig into this interview, I would like to just introduce briefly what I know about Jamshed. So Jamshed is a very senior professional with 27 years of experience working in gender equality, democratic governance, environment policy and development coordination. He's worked across Europe, East Africa, South and Southeast Asia with multiple UN agencies and NGOs. He's held senior advisor position to UN Regional Director for Asia and Pacific. He's been the UN country representative of Indonesia, and something that I'll come to later, but along with that, he's held leading positions with UNDP, including as director, EI at the Oslo Governance Center, and senior program specialist for UNV in Bonn. Jamshed holds multiple master degrees from Harvard University, Kennedy School, and London School of Economics. And the interesting fact that this is not his first tenure in Pakistan. This is the second time he's come to Pakistan. He was here before in the same position as country representative of UN Women. So welcome back to Pakistan, Jamshed. And are you excited to be back?
Thank you so much, Nabila. Wonderful to be on a podcast. I must say it's my very first time on a podcast. I've done many talks in various fora, but this is the first. So definitely very excited to be back. It's a privilege to be able to be leading UN Women Pakistan at this very critical moment. So yeah, really looking forward to a lot of great work together with many of our partners.
Thank you. So now, on a serious note, just a little bit about your personality. Who is Jamshed Kazi? And also, in this role as country representative of UN Women, what is it that you are actually required to do?
Okay, well, thank you. You've already given quite a nice introduction. That's the more professional side of me. But as a person, I would say, I mean, growing up, I've always been a bit of an introvert. That's hard to believe because my job entails doing quite the opposite. It's always meeting people, being around, development partners, UN
I
colleagues.
don't think you were ever an introvert.
Well, I mean, that's you can ask my mom. I mean, that's how I have been. And I mean, I was shy to begin with, but I think it, slowly, gradually began to come out of my shell. But I'm also someone who always was drawn towards social issues. Growing up, I was also very fascinated by, the model UN. So that was, in a way, my first foray into the UN system. Of course, we didn't distinguish at the time between the UN, as in the UN agencies, and the various member states and countries. It was just fun and games. But I must say that during the course of that experience, as an adolescent, this is where you began to have really interactions with boys and girls. And I think it was at that early age I began to realize, wow, there are some very smart girls in this room who have very important, interesting, and bright things to say. So, and I am Bangladeshi, so I'm very familiar with some of the norms and some of the social pressures associated with, the various gender roles. So I also grew up in a fairly conservative household. So, but it was very good to have that interaction early on because it was at that stage when you began to realize, wait a minute, it's boys are not in any way smarter or have any edge. You in a classroom setting, in a professional setting, we are all competing and are there are brilliant girls who can really do wonders.
I think a lot of men can realize this very early on. But what they do is, and I'm just talking from my personal experience, that the social norms, the stereotypical roles, it suits them so much that they keep falling for that trap, and eventually they convince themselves that there is some certain difference, and that's why makes our job so important to fight for gender equality. What do you think?
And this is connected to the privilege and powers. Giving up power, giving up space is always challenging. It's very difficult. I think the conversation we have to have with men and boys is that this is not a winner take all or zero sum game. It's not a cricket match where someone wins and someone loses. So if we're able to make space for everyone, advocate for equal opportunity in whatever space, be it in the field of, whether it's in the science field, whether it's in agriculture, whether it's in gender, wherever, I think it's important that we encourage that partnership. So, but it is a tough conversation to have because, again, that is the uphill challenge. As I like to say, the work that we do is not as simple as fixing a tube well or building a school, because that's brick and mortar. When you're in the business of changing mindsets, changing certain very entrenched social norms and practices, it's a different ballgame. And I think that is the challenge, not unique to Pakistan, but generally we see across the region and the world.
True. Gender remains an issue, and unfortunately, not a single country that we can say has achieved 100% gender parity. You mentioned men and boys. I would like you to elaborate on that a bit. What is the role that they can play, especially in a country like Pakistan, where under 30 years old make over 60% of the population. So, in this young people, among these young people, especially when it comes to the young men and boys, what can they do to make the world or Pakistan a fairer place for both the sexes or for all the genders?
I mean, I think there's a lot of things we can do. One is, of course, to have constantly have conversations with the younger generation, the young boys, and and I try to myself, my team, and other colleagues. We're trying to reach out to universities, schools, engaging with boys who are in their formative stages. It's much more harder, I think, to try and change mindsets once they're very well ingrained. So it is very important to engage with adolescents. Also, I think there's sometimes it's the small things that matter. So within a group of young boys, there will always be, you see, a lot of it is about peer pressure. So if there's a group of boys, and I have been there, when there's a group of boys and you look up to one of the boys who is the group, the leader of the pack, and this person says something insensitive about women or makes a comment, the role of the media plays a very important role. A lot of the advertising industry or the drama serials in Pakistan also, I think it's people who do watch it. And I must confess, I'm among those who occasionally does watch.
Do you watch Pakistani plays?
I do. I mean, I don't have a lot of time to do it, but I do enjoy. It is very addictive. Once in a while, and when you start an episode, it seems
What's
like.
the recent one that you've seen?
I think it's called Kabhi Main Kabhi Tum, if I'm not mistaken. It was.
I think,
This is the one with Fahad Mustafa and Hania Amir.
Hania Amir.
I mean, I guess there's many reasons why I found that to be quite interesting, and I watched through it. I think it was because it didn't have that typical very tired storyline where there is a villain and there's a good force and the bad force, and it isn't nuanced. Here, I think this is actually why I enjoyed this was actually it showed an example of a relationship where I think the man evolved over time, and it was because of the very important conversation he had with his wife, and they were learning in the process, both of them. So I think this also tells us that patriarchy is equally harmful for men, because in this particular drama, the husband was also feeling the weight of patriarchy, and the pressures on him was tremendous to demonstrate that he can provide for the family. And I think the trying to break through those stereotypes is very important. So I think what I was just basically saying is that I think it's more messaging like these, not just in the terms of drama, but in the media in general. I think we have to show a more nuanced reality of Pakistan, because I think Pakistan is changing. You do see greater awareness of gender everywhere you go. And I'm making a comparison based on where I was the last time I was here, which is, over 5-6 years ago.
I was going to ask you, when you came back this time around, did you see any striking difference, because you were working in the same field when you left and you've come back to the same position? So what do you think? Have we made any progress, or are we regressing on gender equality and women empowerment goals? What is your opinion?
Well, it's a tough one. I mean, I think that if you look at some of the global data sets, so I know that the Global Gender Gap Report, which the World Economic Forum produces every year. The last time I was here, a few years ago, Pakistan still wasn't doing terribly well. It was ranked somewhere around 143, 144. I think the most recent data from 2024 still shows that much hasn't changed in those data sets. So if you were to look at that, it seems like there hasn't been progress. But I would beg to differ slightly, because I think that in that period there have been a number of positive developments in terms of more or amended legislation, whether it's on women's inheritance, whether it's on anti-rape. For example, Pakistan has the very first 7 anti-rape crisis centers that has been established in the past couple of years. There has been, for example, an 88% increase in women police in Balochistan, right? So these are very concrete things that have happened. Now, I'm also coming back to Pakistan having served in Indonesia, which is the world's largest Muslim majority country. It has many of the same challenges of Pakistan. But the difference there is that you see many, many more women publicly in the workforce. And I think coming back, I bring some inspiration and hope from there to say that there is a different reality that is possible for Pakistan. You know, there is, and not that I'm saying Indonesia is the only model, but it is a pretty good model for us to draw on for many things that are still challenging in Pakistan, particularly in the area of women's economic empowerment, which is where you see a big gap between Indonesia and, say, Pakistan in terms of women's uptake of jobs.
Tell me this, you spoke about the anti-rape crisis cells, the Balochistan police force, where women are now, more and more women are joining. Has UN Women played any role in this? And the women economic empowerment, which you're citing as one of the main areas, what is UN Women under your leadership planning to do in these areas?
So, I mean, UN Women in Pakistan and, you know, globally, we have a number of areas that we are focusing on. So, preventing violence against women and girls, the area of rule of law, access to justice. You have economic empowerment, and we can also talk maybe later about, you know, also the political participation. So these are, by broad strokes, the areas that we work on. And of course, we, together with many of our development partners, you know, in the case of, for example, rule of law, we work very closely with our UN system partners, UNDP, UNODC, and with great support from the EU. Also with the US State Department with on the anti-rape crisis centers, helping to establish these centers. That has been a role that I think that UN Women has played. Similarly, with economic empowerment.
True. Digital gender gap is a huge issue, and I know that UN Women has been working to address that with the government of Pakistan. Something very important that's happened in the recent past, and that is the changing funding scenarios. And with this, some experts are predicting that more and more agencies like the UN Women as well as the NGO sector will have to rely on internal sources. So I know UN Women works with the private sector. Do you think that, or what are your thoughts on this changing scenario, and how do you think, would you guide others as well as how do you plan to address those issues?
So I think, you know, I mean, of course, a lot of the work that the UN does in Pakistan, I mean, this isn't coming from, I mean, there is no such real thing as UN's funding. The funding we do get comes from various member states. That has been a model for a very long time. Of course, we have to recognize that the overall situation in Pakistan, because of a variety of economic factors, even public funding is constrained. There's also, it's a country that's also heavily, you know, dealing with debt issues. But that being said, I think we, for UN Women and other, I can only speak for UN Women to say that we need to be constantly looking for innovative models of financing, which are not just the traditional sources that we have, increasingly looking at being able to plug into public sector funding. And by the way, I think we have to acknowledge that there is public sector funding in some provinces more than others. When it comes to gender policies, gender strategies, the funding does exist. At times that funding may be underutilized. UN Women will continue to work closely with the private sector, with champions, to look at how we can have them partner into some of the programs that we, together with the government, are doing. So I am very encouraged, and often they are the ones at the cutting edge of innovation. So we learn from the private sector and the things that they do, whether it's looking at daycare centers, whether it's looking at flexi policies and parental leave. They are, I think, looking at some of the best practices. And I think the rest of the country should follow some of those examples.
Absolutely. I think the private sector has a key role to play. And the thing is, they have gone through all the surveys, which are enough to convince them that unless they adopt the principles of diversity, equality, inclusion, they will be the ones missing out on their profits. So that's a very solid argument, and they need to, and they come to UN Women for guidance and to sort of for all the tools that we have so they can go about it the right way. That's interesting. But there's a segment of society, and unfortunately a large segment of society, which still believes that any work that we are doing for gender equality, for women empowerment is quite unnecessary, because women have all the rights that they need in a structure like ours that works perfectly. And all those people who are believers of equal rights are actually going to upset the system that works perfect for them. What do you have to say to those people? And where will the private sector get all the people all the women that they need to hire if this remains the thinking of the society?
Yeah, I mean, this is a challenge I think we continue to face. I mean, let me rewind the clock, say 30 years ago, when in 1995, 189 countries came together in Beijing, where to this day, it's still the most progressive blueprint for gender equality, which is otherwise known as the Beijing Plan of Action. What is quite striking is that was a great milestone. But 30 years later, some of the language, some of the commitments, some of the agreements we made back then are being challenged. And it's because of the same sort of mindset and backlash to say, haven't we already gotten too far? I've heard this in this country too, and it's sometimes baffling to say, nee, every woman has their rights. What are you talking about? We're good. We don't need to do this. And I would say to those people that we just need to look at the data and look at the facts. I mean, I think once we get to the stage where women and girls are in education at 50%, in the workforce at 50%, are in cabinet at 50%, are in the parliament at 50%, then we can think about, okay, maybe we need to sort of, balance things out a little bit, but we're not there yet. We are not there yet. And I think the reason why this pushback is again, as I said earlier, I said at the beginning that, well, male privilege becomes an entitlement, then equality feels like oppression. So even giving up that little chunk. So we are still discussing, should we have minimum 10% quota as election candidates? We're still talking about 10% or 20%, not even speaking about 50%, because that is too dramatic. It seems too transformational. We're not. So, but I think we have to get past that stage to say that is where we want to go. That is what Beijing and the Sustainable Development Goals asks for us. So again, just an anecdote. I won't say who, I won't say which government and which department, but I once, some years ago, had a long conversation with a group of officials. We were talking about women's labor force participation. It was a 2-hour conversation, and we had my team, many of them women, around the table. But when the women got up and left, after what I thought was a great conversation, the men in the room, as the door shut, said, Qazi Saab, agar hamare sare khawateen kaam karenge, to hum kya karenge? So
I forgot to tell you he speaks fluent Urdu.
No,
but
not at all. I don't
it himself. But that's cool.
I don't speak it fluently. I mean, I can manage to understand comprehension, but don't test me more. Just to say that I think it just reinforces your point that under these circumstances, it means we just have to be that much more purposeful in pushing back, in encouraging women to go for those job opportunities, to also work with many of the men.
Jamshed, two things that if I was part of this conversation, because we are the converted ones, so we normally aren't, would come to my mind is number one, is that fear true? Like, is it real that men will lose privileges if there is gender equality in the world? One. And two, if it is a true kind of a genuine fear that they are dealing with, then how will we ever convince the world to agree for measures that will bring in gender equality?
So I think it's important, like I said, it's important that everyone feels that this is a win-win, right? Because end of the day, this is really about changing power dynamics. This isn't a technical project. This is a political project. And when I say political, I mean, it's also the same argument can be about inclusion. When you're building nations and you're building states, you want to bring all parts of your society, different faiths, different ethnicities, gender, it all forms part of that. So it is as a principle, we have to be very purposeful in saying, we want everyone to come along. And I think, the father of this nation, Muhammad Ali Jinnah once said very, very, very clearly that you cannot progress and no nation can rise unless your women are standing shoulder to shoulder. So I think that's still very relevant today. And if I were to tell you that there are studies that have been done in a number of countries in Asia and in Europe, where when you have women in charge of local district budgets and as mayors, you begin to see more of the investment in areas such as health and education, which don't just benefit women, by the way, they benefit everyone. And so there is a general sense that when women have leadership positions, they're not thinking about their own interests. They're thinking about the interests of the wider community. And this is also something that my fellow countryman and Nobel laureate Muhammad Yunus in Bangladesh discovered long ago when he started the whole process of Grameen Bank and microfinance. The whole idea behind that was, if I'm going to invest 100 taka in a woman, that is the returns on that is going to be far beyond just her, and it will go towards the community and the family. So I think this is where I would say that if more people begin to see these, then they will see that this is everyone benefits. It's not like I'm losing, you win.
Yeah.
So we have to think, even if we think in our own self-interests, investing in gender equality is in our self-interests.
True. I hope people realize this sooner than it's, because the longer it takes for us to accept this reality, that this is how things should be, we are the ones who are losing as a country, because half our population cannot exploit their full potential, and that is a huge tragedy in the long run. So, coming back to your personality, because you are now the head of UN Women, which means that you will be, and under your leadership, they'll be running a program. So it's very important to understand what the man is all about. Do you like music?
You're asking someone from Bangladesh if they like music. Of course, music is, I think, the lifeblood. I enjoy music a great deal. I listen to a lot of Pakistani music as well.
Really?
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite?
I have a quite varied list, but for example, I really anything from sort of ghazals to Sufi to folk, whether it's Mehdi Hasan Saab and Abda Parveen. There is, I think, you have Hadika Kiani, Kurat Alain Baloch, Misha Shafi, Reshma.
You know more than I do about this.
And anything that's on Coke Studio, which
you like Coke Studio.
I can say that I think it's the best Coke Studio in the entire sub-region. I will upset some people by saying so, but I can as a South Asian, I really do feel that Coke Studio Pakistan is is the best one out there, and many people share my views. So I
Yeah.
think it's and it's such a rich tapestry of expression of culture. It's great.
We as Pakistanis are even more interested in food than we are in music. How different is the Bangladeshi food from Pakistani food? And do you like anything that we make over here?
Well, I mean, Bangladeshi food is fairly simple. I mean, and it's easy to please me. So if I'm going somewhere and if I have dal chawal,
You're happy?
I'm happy. If there is machli, that's a bonus, but it doesn't have to be. Usually, wherever I go in Pakistan, it's a lot more heavier food. In a Pakistani household, you'd never entertain somebody with dal chawal. It would almost be
No.
insulting,
Yeah.
which is quite contrary to what I believe. But I think there's only so much of biryani, pulao, and
We have to have a
and
chicken-
karai and
chicken dish and a
shinwari
meat
and all this
dish.
other stuff.
Yeah.
But I think it just means that I have to be more conscious of what I eat and the fact that I need to get up and exercise. And in this job, there isn't a lot of scope for moving around as much. You're sitting at a desk or doing a podcast. But no. I mean, the food is also both food and music is something that I'm also very passionate about.
I think Pakistan will make you happy because we exercise not so much, but food we are very much into, and people who come here, they do develop taste for our rich, spicy food before they leave. You've been here a long time, even before you came in as a CR. Did you? In total, how much time have you spent in Pakistan?
So my first job in Pakistan, believe it or not, was nothing to do with gender. It had to do with marine turtle conservation.
Oh,
So
wow.
I was along the coast of Sindh and Balochistan, looking after turtles, sea turtles. So
Did you
that's a bit of a trivia people don't really know about me.
No, I didn't know about
Yeah.
that. So that's an interesting thing to start. But then, why gender?
Well, I mean, that was like I
turtles
said,
are
that was
cute.
turtles are cute and everything. It has, yeah. I mean, subsequently, when I started off with the UN, my first job at the UN was environmental related, but it has been over now 20 years that I've been working on issues that are mostly governance, human rights. So gender was very much part of that. But I must say that, being with UN Women really has helped me grow so much as an individual, as a person, as a man, I believe, because, you get very deep into those issues and you begin to see things from a very different lens. And if you're talking to women a lot more, and I think I would encourage more men to talk to more women, you get a very different worldview. Your perspective changes. And I think I'm very thankful for that opportunity, because I think even though I was working on governance and human rights, it wasn't very much deepening my knowledge about gender equality, which I've had the privilege of doing for the last 10 years. We provide spaces or facilitate the process through which we can have more girls and women participate in all sectors. So, I'll give you an example. We as UN Women and as the UN, we go to a lot of conferences, a lot of workshops. And it is frequent in Pakistan that you turn up at an event where there are only men sitting on the panel, or there is a committee that is set up and there are only male members. This isn't something sometimes people pick up on, but at least, certainly I'm very sensitive to that, and I also tell my other UN colleagues that if you are ever in that situation, make it a point to ask, where are the women in this conversation? Where are the women in the room? And it's not just simply the numbers, but it's also because by having more women participating, the quality of the conversations and the decisions made at the end of the day are better informed, because you are taking perspectives from a lot more people and you're taking the perspectives of women. So I think maybe I'm oversimplifying it, but I'm just simply saying what you can do is to make sure that you look around you and you try and encourage, facilitate, enable more participation of women across whatever field you happen to be. And that's not very hard to do. You need to be able to be an advocate and an ally for that.
Jamshed, I can't resist asking you this. Why a man as head of the UN Women Agency? Why? You're such an advocate for women. What happened there?
Well, I'll say why not, and I guess it's also, I think if we accept the premise that our gender, our biological composition should not be any bar to any profession, any field we wish to take on, and we are qualified for, and we compete for, then I think that is the essence of gender equality. I will say that, I mean, not to defend myself as such, but to say that in at least UN Women, there's very few people who hold a similar position like me. So in the Asia Pacific region, there's just two of us who are in similar positions.
There's another one? I thought you were the only one.
I am not the only one. I have a colleague, a very dear colleague, who is the UN Women representative in Papua New Guinea. But if you look at UN Women globally, of our 80, 90 offices, there's probably, I would say, I'm guessing maybe 7, 8, maybe a little bit more men. So still, in terms of male representatives of UN Women globally, we're only about maybe 10%. So I think that, and at the same time, I think it is important, therefore, that we should have more men being able to be champions, be advocates. I mean, there are certain things, obviously, that I cannot do as well, but there are other things that I probably have greater access to in terms of engaging with some types of men, you know. But I think that, yeah, I think similarly, I would say that we need to see more women in positions which are male dominated, whether it's in the tech field, science, aerospace, engineering, energy. So I think both works. I think we need to be able to, yeah.
Absolutely, because the gender does not mean that we create different worlds for different sexes.
And I just want to add, I didn't mean to interrupt. I just wanted to add that I think that, again, in my role, I have to be very conscious that when I speak, I'm not speaking for women. I see my role as more to amplify those voices, to create those spaces where they don't exist, and encourage others to do so. So I think it is a fair point to say, you know, I cannot consider myself as that spokesperson. I'm not for women. Women have their own voices and they need to speak, but it's a question of making sure you create the spaces, you see where the gaps are, you then enlist the support of other allies, particularly the men and boys.
I'm totally convinced, and I'm very happy that you're here, and we wish you best of luck in your current position. As we come towards the end of our time is running out, I normally ask this one question from all my guests here, and it's like, think of me as a fairy godmother who has the power to grant you 3 wishes. Now, keeping your role in UN Women in mind, what are the 3 things, the top 3 things that you will want?
I wasn't expecting this question, but maybe I'll do you a favor as my fairy godmother. And since you've been so kind to me, I'll return the favor by saving you 2 questions. So or I will only have one answer. I don't need only one wish. Okay. And I think that wish, if I could really boil it down, would be really to ensure that we have a world where every girl, every woman has equal opportunity to be participating in any sector they wish. That's the economic sphere, the political sphere, the social sphere. And honestly, if we're able to honor that, we're able to deliver on that, that solves most of your world's problems. That will bring greater decision making, whether you're talking about trying to fix climate change, fossil fuels, whether you're trying to broker peace in a very troubled part of the world, and whether you want to grow the economy. If we're able to do these things, I think that in itself, it may be very simplistic, it may be very naive, but I think that is also the cornerstone or the catalyst for making us achieve all the other sustainable development goals that we have.
We come to the end of this season of podcasts. So next time, see you with the 3rd season. This was the season's finale, and what better way to end it but to get the thoughts of the country representative of UN Women, who has the main agenda to bring in gender equality and women empowerment for a gender talks. Allah Hafiz.